in York.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Minister, I'd like to thank him for his appearance here today, and as well as staff, and thank them for the important work that they do, and I'm sure they enjoy sitting here as much as I do. Right? Anyways, to get back to what's on hand here. If the Minister was paying attention through the two throne speeches, he would be well versed in knowing that I have a great concern for the infrastructure in my riding. And I'm going to get to that, but first I'm going to get to some larger issues. The budget document, in my opinion, it's like a living and breathing animal. It's always seems to be different from one day to the next. When we first look at the budget document, the budget for DTI was X, right? And with certain things removed. But now they're talking about bringing things back in, and I'm very concerned that when they bring these other projects back in, like going back at Highway 11, twinning it and all this, now I'm not arguing the merits of what they're doing, but my point is that when you bring things back into the budget that were cut out, then I start wondering about the frontline services, the ditching, the paving, the grading, all of that. And I would like the Minister to explain to me how by bringing those projects back on board, it's not going to affect those things.
Mr. Chair, through you to the member opposite. When we make changes such as we have with Route 11, we want to make affordable changes, which that's exactly what we have done. These changes don't impact our summer or winter maintenance budgets, and so we're committed to our current asset management, and we want to stabilize that budget, and what we have committed to is increasing it over the years so that we get to 100% funding so that we can do all of the asset management projects that we need to complete in a year to maintain our assets. One of the good things when we talk about Route 11 is that we were going to have to bring or rehab Route 11, the existing portion of it, and now we're able to do that under this new program as long as we get federal support, and we're doing it with federal dollars as well as our own. So that's the only project that's changed that we brought back in that would have affected the budget, but because of the amount of participation from the federal government, we're really we're in good stead there.
Thank you for that answer, and I'm glad that I think you get my gist of the meaning of what I was getting at. But there's other things hanging out there, like Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister. There's other things hanging out there, like the Justice Building, all this and that. Like if you start bringing all those things back in, it worries me that we have to cut in areas that really should never be cut. Right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the member opposite, or to the member on this side of the House, when we look at projects like the courthouse, we recognize that at some point, not this year, but at some point we have to build that, but we want to build what we need, and so when we do that, it will be incorporated into our budget, but it's not something that we're bringing back now, nor will we be bringing back some of the other projects that we pushed out at this point in time. So when we do that, as I said, we want to build to the needs, and we don't want to, just because we know that we need a courthouse, we don't want to overbuild. So we'll be scaling back somewhat. So I hope that answers your question somewhat. It's not that this year that we're not increasing our budgets. They're stabilized the way they were, and we're not bringing new projects in. It's certainly a multi-year projects that we're looking at.
Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister, I'll move off and trust that he understands what I'm getting at, and I'll trust what he's telling me. I'm going to move on to something else. Like just recently, and I'm sure you're fully aware of it, when I think it's Highway 2 of the Trans-Canada that had to close down for a while during the flood. I'm wondering if you have taken a good hard look at that, because if you go from the bridge that crosses the St. John River down into that floodplain, and then you go across a short piece of highway, and then you go up on the Jemseg Bridge, that's the problem. Am I right in saying that that is the total problem? Okay. Well, that being the case, because you're nodding your head, right? That being the case, do you have it on your radar to raise that, or to build some kind of a, bridge like you do in the swamps in Florida? Because it's like I know it's a small area, but there might be a lot of money, but it would save New Brunswick a lot of grief if we could look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the member opposite. Certainly, we're very much aware of that situation there, and we reckon, like, between the two bridges, it's approximately 2.5 kilometers. So even during the flooding period, we were looking and saying, what can we do? What are the possibilities? And we have to wait till the floodwaters go down, as you understand. And we'll be looking at it with the operator. And it gets a bit more complicated because it is a P3 operation, and we have to deal with the operator as much as we have to deal through our own department. And so there are a number of options that we could be considering. So we won't leave any stone unturned. We'll just want to look at all the options before we decide exactly what we can do to mitigate that. And we will be looking at accessing some federal funding as well to assist in the mitigation.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister, I think the sooner we get on that, the better, because it seems to me that we're going to be experiencing these things for a while, and the quicker we get on it, the less grief there will be for the province. And I think, it can only be good. I know it will cost money, but we don't need to shut down our main arteries, right? So, I'll move on to other things. I'm going to get into roads and highways that, like we all know, and it's hard for me to ask questions after everyone else has asked so many questions, the good ones. If I took all the questions that I have in here that are repetitive, it looked like a piece of Swiss cheese. I'm going to try to get through it without being too repetitive. Like we all know, and it's common knowledge, that the roads and highways are in poor shape. There's potholes, crumbling asphalt, it doesn't matter where you go. There's sinkholes, you name it. And a lot of this is due to the freezing and the thawing and the water getting into the pavement, and then it freezes, and then everything cracks and things start crumbling, and there's a lot of maintenance involved, and I hope that the asphalt companies will get open soon so that we can get at it, because I got a big problem in my riding, a really, really big problem. And I want to say that each year the CAA announces Atlantic Canada's top 10 worst roads, and this year, as in past years, 4 of New Brunswick roads are highlighted among the top 10. Can the Minister address the state of the province's road, and does he believe the roads and highways in this province are in a state of disrepair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the member, some people say, and I don't want to make light of this, but some people say it was the best year for maple syrup, but it was the absolute worst year for potholes, with the freezing and thawing, the cooling in the evenings, and the heat during the day. As you said, it certainly wreaked havoc with the roads. As far as the 10 worst roads in the province or in the Maritimes, and actually we made the top 5 of the top 10, so 4 of them, okay, 4 of them actually are on our project list that we will be addressing this year. The 5th one is warranty work that has to be done, and so that's be looked after as well. So all 5 of those roads will be addressed this summer. So I hope that next year we don't see them again. I know that one of them was, this is the 2nd year it's been on that list, and so that's not something we look forward to. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see which new ones crop up. But hopefully we can address many of the situations that we've seen in the past few years, and the road system will be much better throughout the province, not just in one riding or a couple.
Last number, any questions left? We've been sitting for 4 hours.
Mr. Chair, to the member, this may be a rather lengthy instruction, but I just want you to be aware of what asset management is all about and how we manage it in DTI. It's a systematic process based on economics, engineering, and sound business principles. Its goal is to effectively maintain our roadway system in the most cost-effective way. One of the guiding principles is to keep our good highways good. So this is done by dedicating a portion of the funding available to minor rehab work. And by doing minor rehab work on a roadway, it prevents a much costlier treatment in the future. While we must put some focus on minor rehab work, we must also consider improving portions of roadway which are not at an acceptable level of service, or roadways in which there may be safety concerns. This would include doing a more costly rehab treatment to improve the roadway. Asset management steers away from the traditional fix the worst first approach. And I know that sometimes that's what members are asking about. Well, look, that road's in bad condition. Why are you doing this road? It helps generate the best series of treatments at the right time for the life cycle of an asset. It's about doing the right repair at the right time at the right place. And DTI has been practicing asset management since 2008, and with the use of our asset management model and our condition inventory of assets, we can forecast what future conditions and spending will look like. In 2011, model results indicated a requirement of $130 million a year in order to, over a 10-year period. For asphalt, that was $100 million, and chip seal was $30 million, to bring our roads to an acceptable level. This was based on the following constraints: minimizing cost, non-declining conditions, and eliminating very poor roads over a 10-year period. So in 10 years, we would look after all our roads. Budget expenditures for several years did not meet the funding levels, and this resulted in an increase in the infrastructure budget and an increase in poor and very poor roads. So that's what we're trying to catch up with. As of our 2019 model runs, based on previous data, our highways have a deficit of $446 million. In other words, it would require $446 million to eliminate all the poor and very poor roads. So as part of the asset management process, the department considers traffic volume, industry needs, whether there's truck traffic or farm traffic or just what we see on the roads, tourism, and as part of the criteria which is used to determine the selection of which sections of roads to resurface. Budget amounts are divided evenly across districts based on their total kilometer of roads, and district priorities are reviewed in conjunction with the candidate list produced by the asset management model. So the model gives a breakdown in kilometers of the work required in each treatment class. When creating the capital program, consideration should always be given to grouping jobs together based on their proximity to one another. And as I said previously, we have a budget of, this year's budget is approximately $67 million, so you can see we're far below what we would require to cover off on a true asset management program. But we're committed to ramping that up each year so that in a 4-year period we should be very close to the $130 million range that I spoke of being needed to keep the roads in good repair and to game, so that we're getting back to having all our roads in good condition. That's how the asset management program works. And we're not looking at adding more assets to the inventory. And our program is designed to provide stable funding with modest growth to focus on the asset management, not asset growth. So I hope that answers most of your questions, but in a 10-year period, once we reach that maximum, we should be able to rehab all of our roads.
Mr. Chair, through you to the minister, I may have to get him to come out in the riding and help me, explain all this engineering stuff, like so, because it's hard to get that to the constituents, the one that's banging their car all the heck going out the Royal Road. Anyways, road construction and repair experts say that it's important to have a strong drainage system that quickly eliminates water so it doesn't seep into the road and to seal cracks when they first start to form. Does the minister believe that the state of the province's roads are linked to poor water drainage?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the member regarding your question, there are a number of things that will go towards making a good road service. Crack sealing, and that's one of the keys. Crowning roads, and vegetation management. But to your question, and specifically to ditching and keeping the water off the roads, to my mind, that's very important. As I said, proper ditching provides better drainage, and certainly it helps. And I just said to the staff that that's why we put 2 ditches on each road, because I think it's important to keep the water off the roads.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to start trying to go off script here and cut to the chase. MRDC, the company which oversees the maintenance of the Trans-Canada Highway from Long's Creek to Moncton, has stated the province needs to begin to look at what needs to be done to prevent highways from being closed during flooding events. Can the minister address the issue of flooding, which environmental and climate change experts are calling the new normal, and the impacts of it's having on the province's roads and highways? And are there discussions happening from an engineering perspective as to how to deal with this?
Mr. Chair, thank you, and to the member, in respect to MRDC, and as we spoke earlier, our team has already been working with them to look at options so that we can mitigate the impacts and gain ground on them. And we want to look at all the options that we might pursue. And as I said, this may not just be raising the road, it may be putting up barriers, it may be putting up flood walls. We want to, access all the sources that we have available. In terms of other DTI assets, we have a flood and recovery team, and they're currently looking at roads and assets that are repeatedly compromised, because we recognize it's not just on the Trans-Canada Highway, but there are other roads that have been impacted, and I'm sure in your own riding you've had water over roads and bridges closed or whatever the case might be due to the flooding. So we want to develop a plan, and as appropriate, we want to be able to discuss this with the federal government to access whatever funding dollars may be available to us to mitigate those problems.
Thank you for that. To the Minister, I know there's been a lot of questions asked in regards to covered bridges, but what I'm simply going to ask is, can you give me an overview or a forecast of what you think is going to happen with what remains of our covered bridges?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the member opposite, as you may be aware, and I think we've said it many times, that as a government we're very committed to preserving the covered bridges of the province. At one time there were over 300 covered bridges in New Brunswick, and now we're down to 54 that we control, and there are 4 others, 2 are federal and 2 are municipal bridges. So many people have some sort of a history with covered bridges. I know that many people have stories about their parents or grandparents meeting on a covered bridge or driving through on the horse and buggy and all those things that we do now in cars. So, but it's certainly, they're very important to the infrastructure that we have. We've been working on a plan that involves many things that will ensure that they remain with us, that we want to make sure that we have covered bridges and preserve them over the years. The plan includes comprehensive customized management and a maintenance plan. We're working at present with others, such as tourism, heritage and culture. We're taking digital imaging, so that in the event that we have to go in and repair these bridges, we know exactly what we need to replace, what it's all made from and how it was built. And we're also working with an international bridge consultant to give us more information and to provide us with the expertise in building and replacing and repairing these bridges. In fact, the department had a meeting with them today, and so we're very proactive in that respect going forward. As I said, covered bridges are very much a part of New Brunswick's culture and heritage, and our work. We had an online survey done, and we had almost 3,000 customers, residents, give us feedback on what the bridges meant to them. So we realize it's not just us saying that, but it's the residents themselves that are very cognizant of what's involved with covered bridges.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister, I had some pages here about ferries, but I heard all the comments the Minister made earlier. I just want to reiterate in respect to ferries that I think is very unfair that Canadians have to go through 2 border crossings to get from Campbell to Canada in the winter and all this now. And I hope he keeps that in his forefront of his mind, because it's a very important issue, especially with given the way the United States looks at border security these days. It could be pretty irritating, I expect, for those folks. So I hope you keep that in your thoughts. I was thinking the other day, when thinking of all the flooding and stuff in the province and all of the sandbags that have been put together by whomever, there's got to be a great pile of sandbags. Does the Minister or your department, do you take those back and recycle them through the sand sheds?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the question. That whole recovery process is being handled through ELG, so I'm not exactly sure all the processes involved. I know that some of them are being returned to landfills. I know that some of the fire departments that were involved have put them in containers, and hopefully we'll be able to use them again. And they do have a supply of bags that they didn't have starting out this year, but there seemed to be a great supply of those, so they're prepared for another event, and hopefully it doesn't occur in a few years. But as far as the bags of sand that are being collected, there have been a number of them that are contaminated, so the authorities are telling us, the health, provincial health officer is telling us not to use that sand anywhere where people come in contact with it, so the landfills are the best place for them.
Thank you very much. I've asked you this question before, and when we were up going through the riding, looking at things, the Peniac Bridge, that's what I call it. It's a bridge that crosses from Canada Street over to River Street. It's commonly called the Peniac Bridge. And my question before was, is that scheduled for decommissioning? And the reason I'm raising it is because River Street will flood periodically, and it did this year, where the old train bridge comes across. It's a trail network now. Well, right there, that road will flood. So I don't know what would happen if that bridge was decommissioned and it flooded, what that would do for the residents along the road there on that side of the river, whether that would cut them off from first responders. So to me, it's important that we maintain some kind of a bridge there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the member. So this particular bridge has been frequently hit by ice during the spring of the year, and so it's severely compromised by that. And what we're told is that it's likely going to have to be closed in the future. And if we do close a bridge, we always notify the school and the first responders. And as I mentioned earlier, we are on flood-related issues, and certainly we'll take all of this into consideration as to how we can access those roads in the communities. But at the present time, that's where we stand with that particular bridge.
Okay, I have a question on the bridge that crosses what I call the Millbrook, but I know the answer, so I won't ask that question. I know that they're going to fix it this summer. Okay. The Mearsville Bridge, it's not in my riding. It's in our leader's riding, but a lot of my constituents use that bridge quite frequently to come down Crockett and then go to Peniac or wherever, right? That road, that bridge is bad. I notice it's not on your list. I would ask you to consider having people look at that bridge. You don't need to tell me anything. I'm just making Mearsville Bridge, the one that goes across to where the Environment Minister and the Public Safety Minister, that bridge. Yeah. As long as you know what I'm talking about, I don't need an answer. I'm just okay. Okay.
Thank you. I've just been informed that it is on our list, not for this year, but in the future, and so it will be one that we look at to rehab.
And as I've said, and I'm not going to sound like a broken record, like Frederick, New York needs a lot of work. And you know what? I want to take this time to thank you on behalf of my constituents, because I believe that this winter I got pretty good service from DTI in plowing, and when I called them, they responded, and the residents noticed that, and they've thanked me for that. And I want you to know that you can tell Mr. Richard from me that I thank him for that. I really appreciate it. And in closing, I'd just like to ask you, you understand that I'm very concerned about the five-way intersection in Stanley. You know it's on my radar, and it's going to stay on my radar, and therefore it's going to be on your radar. All right? I'll leave it at that, but I would ask you to make a commitment to me. We'll go for a drive someday, and I'll show you some things in my riding, some things that are of major concerns, and we can look at them. I know you're a reasonable man, and you'll look at things in context, and we'll go from there. So having said that, thank you again for your appearance. Thank you for your staff. keep up your hard work. Let's get her done. Hope we get more budget next time.
I certainly appreciate your comments, and I know staff do as well. They're very hardworking, and I appreciate everything they do for me and for the people in New Brunswick, because that's ultimately who we serve. In regards to your riding, I certainly have no problem at all taking a trip with you. I know we have one little chore to do out, and I'm not sure of the road again, but I know you can take me to the exact spot. Yeah, and we'll look after that issue too. I just contacted him yesterday. So anyway, again, I appreciate your comments, and I hope we can continue to work together. Thank you.